Ambassador Vreshtul of the Clintari hegemony sat in his small office aboard the orbital station and stared at his screen. He had 7 thin limbs, large yellow eyes, and a calm mind that had served him well for 200 years. He was a scholar. He liked numbers. He liked patterns. He did not like surprises. Today, he had a surprise. The Galactic Concordance had been studying humans for 12 years. First contact had gone well. The humans were strange but friendly. They drank a hot brown liquid called coffee. They liked dogs. They argued about sports. The Concordance had decided humans were ready to join galactic society. All that was left was the species threat assessment, a long report that listed every danger a new species might bring. Vreshtul had been given the job of finishing it. He had read about human armies. He had read about human weapons. He had read about human history, which was full of wars but also full of music, art, and kindness. None of it worried him too much. Humans were strong, but they were no stronger than many other species in the galaxy. Then his research aide, a young Clintari named Mip, had sent him a strange message. "Honored Ambassador," the message said. "I have found a human concept that I cannot understand. The translation matrix says it is not an error, but I think it must be. Please look at this word." The word was retirement. Vreshtul read the definition twice. Then he read it 3 more times. His 7 limbs went still. According to the human databases, retirement was a state in which a human stopped working, not because they were sick, not because they were too old to think, not because their government told them to stop. They simply chose to stop, and then they did whatever they wanted for the rest of their lives. The state could last 20 years, sometimes 30, sometimes more. Vreshtul tapped his console. He pulled up the numbers. In the human country called the United States, there were about 47 million retired humans. In the whole world, there were hundreds of millions. These were not weak humans. These were humans who had worked for 40 or 50 years. They were experienced. They were skilled. Some had been doctors. Some had been engineers. Some had been soldiers. Some had been scientists. And now, they did nothing. Or rather, they did whatever they wanted. Vreshtul felt cold. In the Clintari hegemony, every citizen worked until their body or mind failed. Work was life. To stop working was to die. The same was true for almost every other species in the galaxy. The Veshani worked. The Kreshval worked. The Tylan worked. Even the lazy Bormo worked, in their own slow way. But the humans had created something new. They had created a class of citizens who had no boss, no schedule, no orders, and no fear of losing their jobs. These citizens still had homes. They still had food. They still had money. They were free in a way that no other species in the galaxy had ever been free. And they had time. So much time. Vreshtul opened a new file and began to write his report. He wrote slowly. He wanted to be careful. He did not want the council to think he was joking. He wrote about the retired humans. He wrote about their numbers. He wrote about their skills. He wrote about their freedom. And then, he wrote a warning. "These citizens have no oversight," he wrote. "No employer watches them. No government directs them. They have decades of experience and unlimited curiosity. We must understand what this means before we welcome humanity into the Concordance." He sent the report to the council that evening. The reply came 2 days later. The council had read his report. They had discussed it. They thought it was sweet. The chairman of the council, a tall glurn named Vasa, had even sent Vreshtul a personal note. "Dear Ambassador," the note said, "your concern is noted, but we believe you may be reading too much into this. Retirement sounds like a charming human custom. We see no threat. Please continue your work and prepare for the admission ceremony." Vreshtul read the note. He read it again. Then he set it aside and stared out the small window of his office. Earth was a blue and white ball in the distance. It looked peaceful. He was not so sure. For the next 3 weeks, Vreshtul did his job. He filed the proper papers. He spoke to the proper people. He attended the proper meetings. But every night, he went back to his office and read more about retired humans. He read about a woman in Florida who had retired at the age of 65 and had then learned to fly small airplanes. She was now 78 and had flown solo across the Atlantic Ocean, twice. He read about a man in Japan who had retired from a car company and had then started building robots in his garage. His robots were now used in hospitals. He read about a group of retired teachers in Kenya who had built a free school in their village. The school taught 500 children. He read about retired soldiers who climbed mountains, retired doctors who wrote books, retired scientists who kept doing science, just for fun, with no pay and no boss. And he read about hobbies. The humans had thousands of hobbies. They built model trains. They watched birds. They grew strange plants. They listened to radio waves from space. They made wine in their basements. They carved wood. They wrote poems. They learned new languages at the age of 70. The more Vreshtul read, the more worried he became. Other species in the galaxy did not have hobbies. Other species worked, ate, and slept. The idea of doing something difficult for no reward was strange to them. But the humans loved it. The humans needed it. A retired human without a hobby was an unhappy human. And an unhappy human, Vreshtul learned, would invent a hobby very quickly. One night, very late, Vreshtul wrote a private note to himself. He did not send it to the council. He did not show it to MIP. He just wrote it and saved it in his personal files. The humans have created something the galaxy has never seen, he wrote. They have made millions of free, skilled, curious citizens with no duties and no fear. We do not know what these citizens will do next. We only know that they will do something. He paused. Then he added one more line. I hope we are ready. He turned off his screen and went to sleep. He slept badly. Far below, on the blue and white planet, 47 million retired humans were already awake. They were drinking coffee. They were reading the news. They were planning their day. The galaxy did not know it yet, but the galaxy was about to change. The Vashani scout cruiser was in trouble. Captain Threll of the Vashani trade fleet stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the warning lights flash red. His 4 arms moved across the control panel, but nothing he did made any difference. The antimatter containment system was failing. In a few hours, the ship would explode. The cruiser had been on a quiet survey mission near Earth. The Vashani were friendly with the Concordance, and the Concordance had asked them to take some readings of the human radio signals. It was supposed to be a simple trip. 3 days in, 3 days out. Easy work. Then the engine had made a strange sound, and now Captain Threll was going to die in low Earth orbit. He sent out a distress signal. The signal was on a Concordance frequency, but it was weak. The nearest Concordance ship was 4 days away. By the time it arrived, Captain Threll and his crew of 6 would be dust floating in space. He told his crew the truth. Vashani were honest people. They did not hide bad news. The crew sat together in the small dining area and shared a final meal. They spoke of their families. They spoke of their homes. They prepared to die with peace in their hearts. Then the radio chimed. It was not a Concordance signal. It was a human signal, and the human on the other end sounded calm and friendly. Hello there, said the voice. This is Harold Kowalski, ham radio operator, calling from Wisconsin. I picked up your distress signal on the high-frequency band. Are you folks in trouble up there? Captain Threll stared at the radio. He had not expected this. The Concordance had told the Vashani that humans did not have space travel, only small satellites and a few research stations. Humans were not supposed to be able to help, but Harold did not sound like a human who knew his limits. We are dying, Captain Threll said in plain Vashani, hoping the translation matrix would work. Our engine is broken. We have no time. Well now, that's no good, Harold said. What kind of engine? Antimatter containment. The field is failing. There was a pause. Then Harold said, Hold on a minute, friend. Let me make some calls. The radio went quiet. Captain Threll looked at his crew. They looked back at him. None of them knew what to say. 20 minutes later, Harold was back. But he was not alone. 3 other voices were on the line. "Captain, I have some friends here who might be able to help," Harold said. "This is Pete. He used to work on Navy nuclear reactors. This is Linda. She was a chemistry professor for 40 years. And this is Margaret. She used to design rocket engines for NASA. We think we can fix your ship, but we need to come up there to do it." Captain Threll did not know what to say. He looked at his first officer, who shrugged with all four shoulders. "How will you come up here?" the captain asked. "Well, that's the fun part," Harold said. "There's a private space company down here in Texas. The owner is a buddy of mine. We went to college together. He's retired now, too, but he still owns the company. I called him. He's getting a rocket ready. We can be in orbit in about 6 hours." Captain Threll did the math. 6 hours plus repair time. It was tight, but it might work. "You will help us?" he asked. "Why?" Harold laughed. It was a warm sound, even through the radio. "Why not?" he said. "I've got nothing else going on this afternoon." 6 hours later, a small white rocket launched from a private spaceport in Texas. It carried 4 humans, all of them over the age of 70. None of them were professional astronauts. None of them were on any government list. They were just 4 old friends with a shared problem to solve. When they docked with the Vashani cruiser, Captain Threll opened the airlock himself. He had never seen a human in person. He was not sure what to expect. The first human through the door was a tall, thin man with white hair and a gentle smile. He wore a blue jumpsuit and carried a metal toolbox. "Captain Threll, I presume?" Harold said. He held out his hand. "Pleasure to meet you. Now, where's this engine of yours?" The repair took 18 hours. In that time, the 4 humans worked without rest. They opened panels. They tested wires. They drew diagrams on paper. They talked to each other in short, calm sentences. They did not panic. They did not argue. They simply worked. Margaret, the rocket engineer, found the main problem in the first hour. The containment field generator had a small crack in one of its coils. The crack was leaking energy. If they did not fix it, the ship would explode. But they did not have a spare coil. So Pete, the nuclear technician, suggested they take a part from a small satellite that was floating nearby. The satellite was old and no longer working. Its parts were close enough to Vashani standards that they might be made to fit. Linda, the chemist, helped seal the part with a special compound she made from items in the ship's kitchen. By the end of the 18 hours, the engine was working again. Better than before, in fact. Then Harold did something strange. He sat down with Captain Threll in the dining area and pulled out a small box from his bag. "Captain," he said, "you've had a hard day. How about a game of cribbage?" "What is cribbage?" Captain Threll asked. "It's a card game. My grandfather taught me when I was 8. I'd be happy to teach you." For the next 2 hours, Captain Threll learned to play cribbage. He was bad at it at first, but he learned. By the end of the second hour, he had won a game. When the Concordance rescue ship finally arrived, the admiral on board could not believe what he saw. The Vashani cruiser was in perfect repair. The crew was safe. And in the dining area, the Vashani captain was sitting with 4 old humans, drinking what looked like hot tea and laughing at something one of them had said. The admiral demanded an explanation. Harold stood up and offered the admiral a cookie from a small bag. The cookies, he explained, were homemade. His wife had baked them that morning. The admiral did not take the cookie. He turned and walked back to his shuttle without a word. That night, on the orbital station above Earth, Ambassador Vreshtul received an emergency message from the Concordance Council. The chairman wanted to speak with him at once. Vreshtul opened the call. Chairman Vasa looked very pale. "Ambassador," the chairman said, "how many humans are like Harold Kowalski?" Vreshtul did not need to look at his notes. He had memorized the number weeks ago. 47 million, he said quietly. In one country. And they are bored. The chairman closed his eyes. 3 other delegates on the call fainted. Vreshtul said nothing more. He had warned them. They had not listened. Now, perhaps, they would. After the Vashani incident, the Concordance Council finally listened to Vreshtul. They sent a team to Earth. The team was small, only 6 members, all from different species. Their job was simple: They were to live among the humans for 90 days. They were to watch the retired humans. They were to report what they saw. The team was given human bodies through a special technology the Concordance kept secret. They looked like exchange students from foreign countries. They had fake names, fake papers, and fake reasons for being on Earth. They were told to blend in and observe. They were not told to panic. But they panicked anyway. The first report came after only 6 days. Subject 1 was a woman named Doris Mendelsohn. She was 68 years old. She had been a librarian for 43 years before she retired. She lived alone in a small house in Ohio with 2 cats and a garden. The team had picked her because she seemed boring. They were wrong. In her garden, Doris was breeding tomatoes. This was a normal human hobby. Many old humans grew tomatoes. But Doris was not just growing tomatoes. She was breeding them with great care, mixing one type with another, keeping notes in a thick book. The team observer watched her for 2 weeks. Then, he sent his report. Subject Mendelsohn has created a strain of tomato that resists 17 known plant diseases, he wrote. She did this by accident. She thought she was just trying to make a tastier tomato. A scientist from the local university came to look at her plants last week. He offered her money for the seeds. She told him she would think about it. She does not seem to understand what she has done. The report continued. Doris was also learning Mandarin Chinese. She had taught herself by watching videos online. She was now able to read simple Chinese books. She was also writing a paper about Old English poetry, which she hoped to publish in a small journal. And she ran a popular video channel where she taught people how to identify birds by listening to their songs. She did all of this in her free time. She had no boss. She had no deadline. She did it because she enjoyed it. The Concordance Council read the report and asked for more. Subject 2 was a man named Frank Delacroix. He was 74 years old. He had been a Marine Corps officer for 30 years before he retired. The team observer had been told that Frank built model trains in his basement. This sounded harmless. It was not harmless. Frank's basement was not a normal basement. It was 4,000 square feet. It went down 2 levels underground. Frank had built it himself, with help from his retired engineer friends, over a period of 15 years. Inside, he had a small railway with working trains. He also had 3 machine lathes. He had a kiln. He had a small chemistry lab. And he had something the team observer could not understand at first. It was a wooden machine, taller than a man, with ropes and weights and a long arm. Frank explained that it was a trebuchet. It was a very old kind of weapon, used in the Middle Ages to throw heavy stones at castles. Frank had built it to throw pumpkins. The neighborhood has a pumpkin festival every October, Frank told the observer, who was pretending to be a young engineering student. I throw pumpkins for the kids. They love it. The trebuchet could throw a 10-pound pumpkin almost 200 meters. Frank had tested it many times. He was very proud of it. The observer reported all of this. He added a note at the end. Subject Delacroix has the skills, tools, and resources to build almost any small machine he can imagine. He uses these skills to entertain children. I do not know if this is comforting or terrifying. The third report was the worst one. The team had discovered a group of retired humans called ham radio operators. There were thousands of them, spread across many countries. They used old-fashioned radio equipment to talk to each other across long distances. Most of them were over the age of 60. Most of them had been doing this for decades. The Concordance had assumed these were harmless old men with hobbies. They were wrong. The ham radio operators had been mapping the radio signatures of Concordance vessels. They had been doing this for years. They had not been told to do it. They had not been paid to do it. They had simply noticed strange signals coming from space, and they had decided to figure out what was making them. They had a website. They had forums. They posted their findings to each other and discussed them like puzzles. They had names like Old Sparky, 7-4, and Retired and Wired, and Captain Crunch, 1962. They knew the radio patterns of 7 different Concordance ship classes. They could tell when a ship was coming and going. They could even guess what kind of mission the ship was on, based on the way its signals changed. They thought it was fun. The Concordance had spent millions of credits to keep its ships secret. The retired ham radio operators had broken that secret with equipment they bought at flea markets and built in their garages. The fourth report was about a woman named Eleanor Vance. She was 79 years old. Her husband had died 3 years ago. After his death, she had become very sad. To feel better, she had taken up a new hobby. The hobby was rocketry. Eleanor lived in a small town in New Mexico. She had built her first rocket in her backyard. It was small, only as tall as her arm. She had launched it on a Saturday morning. It went up about 100 feet and came back down with a parachute. She had clapped her hands and laughed. That had been 3 years ago. Now, Eleanor's rockets were 10 meters tall. They reached the edge of space. The European Space Agency had asked to study her designs. She had said yes, but only if they let her keep building. She had named her largest rocket Gerald, after her late cat. The team observer wrote in his report, "Eleanor Vance is one of the kindest, gentlest humans I have ever met. She bakes cookies for her neighbors. She knits scarves for the local children. And she builds rockets that can reach space. She does all of these things with the same calm, happy energy. She does not see any difference between them." The Concordance Council read all the reports together in one long meeting. When the last report was finished, the room was silent for a long time. Finally, Chairman Vasa spoke. His voice was very quiet. "They are not weapons," he said. "I had thought they might be weapons. Weapons we could understand. Weapons we could plan for." He looked around the room. "They are worse than weapons. They are humans with infinite time, deep knowledge, and no fear. They build trebuchets to throw pumpkins. They breed super tomatoes by accident. They map our ships for fun." He paused. "And there are 47 million of them, in one country alone." No one spoke. No one moved. The chairman closed his eyes. "May the stars help us," he said, "if they ever get angry." The Creshful Dominion had been watching the Concordance for a long time. The Creshful were not part of the Concordance. They were a strong, proud, warlike species. They had 3 eyes, hard skin, and a deep belief that the strong should rule the weak. They had fought the Concordance many times in small battles along the borders of known space. They had never won a big war, but they had never lost one either. When the Creshful spies heard about the strange reports from Earth, they did not believe them. The reports said that humans were dangerous. The reports said that retired humans were the most dangerous of all. The report said that the Concordance was very worried. The Creshful High Command laughed at the reports. "This is a trick," said Warlord Kortek, leader of the Creshful fleet. "The Concordance wants to keep Earth for itself. They are spreading lies to scare us away. They think we will believe that old, weak humans are a threat." He looked at the map of human space on his command screen. "We will not be fooled. We will take Earth before the Concordance can finish its admission ceremony. Once Earth is ours, the Concordance will have to accept it. They will not start a war over one small planet." His officers agreed. The plan was simple. A fleet of 40 Creshful warships would jump to Earth, destroy the small human satellites, land troops on the surface, and take the planet. The whole thing would be over in 3 days. The humans had no real space navy. They had no orbital defenses. They had nothing that could stop a Creshful fleet. So the Creshful thought. The fleet left Creshful space on a quiet morning. It traveled through faster-than-light space for 2 weeks. It came out near the orbit of Mars and began to move toward Earth. The plan was to attack at dawn on the 3rd day. The plan failed before the fleet ever reached Earth. The first warning came from a man named Reggie Thornton. Reggie was 82 years old. He lived in a small village in Cornwall, England. He had been a radar technician in the Royal Air Force for 40 years. After he retired, he had built his own radar system in his garden shed. He used it to track airplanes and satellites. It was his hobby. On the day the Creshful fleet entered the solar system, Reggie was drinking his morning tea. He looked at his radar screen. He saw something strange. "That's not right," he said to himself. He drank more tea. He looked again. The strange signals were still there. They were big. They were many. And they were moving toward Earth. Reggie was old, but he was not slow. He went to his computer and posted on a website where ham radio and radar hobbyists shared their findings. He titled his post, "Strange Returns Near Mars Orbit." Anyone else seeing this? Within 40 minutes, 16 other retired radar specialists from around the world had answered. They had all seen the same signals. They worked together, sharing data through the website, and within 2 hours they had figured out exactly where the fleet was, how fast it was moving, and how big it was. The signals matched no concordance ship. The signals were HFY. A retired SETI scientist in New Mexico named Dr. Margaret Chen had been listening to space radio for fun since she retired. She had a database of HFY signal patterns that she had built over the years, just because she found them interesting. When the ham radio group posted their findings, she ran the signals through her database. She found a match. She emailed her results to a friend, a retired Air Force cryptographer named Bill Reeves. Bill had been decoding enemy signals for the military for 35 years. He was very good at it. He decoded the HFY command frequencies in less than an hour. Bill emailed his results to another friend, a retired State Department analyst named Susan Park. Susan had spent her career studying alien diplomacy. She read the decoded messages and understood, in a single glance, what was happening. The HFY were going to invade Earth. Susan called her old friend at the Pentagon. The friend was also retired, but he still knew people. He made some calls. The calls reached the right offices. By the end of the day, every retired military officer, scientist, and engineer in North America knew about the invasion. What happened next was not a government plan. It was not an army order. It was something the galaxy had never seen before. It was a phone tree. Old people across the country began calling each other. They called their friends. Their friends called their friends. Within hours, a web of millions of retired humans was wide awake and working. There were no commanders. There was no central plan. But there was something better. There was experience. A retired Navy officer in Florida named Stan Brennan owned a houseboat with very good radio equipment. He volunteered to lead electronic warfare from his boat. He had 30 years of experience. He needed no orders. A group of retired aerospace engineers in California began working on small satellites. They had built dozens of them as a hobby over the years. Now they linked them together into a defense system. They worked through the night, drinking coffee, eating pizza, laughing at old jokes. A retired astronomer in Arizona pointed her observatory's biggest telescope at the incoming fleet. She fed live images to a private chat group of 200 retired scientists. They studied the HFY ships and found weaknesses. A group of retired physicists at a small lake house in Michigan began building a high-power laser. They had the parts. They had the knowledge. They had the time. The laser would not destroy a HFY warship, but it would blind one. A retired Air Force pilot named Joe Maddox started a Reddit thread called Aliens Inbound. Within a day, the thread had 10,000 members, all of them retired, all of them sharing information. Some of them had skills no one had thought to ask about for years. One man was a retired Russian missile defense specialist who had moved to America in the 1990s. Another was a retired Israeli air defense officer. Another was a retired Japanese satellite designer. They all worked together. They had no flag. They had no salary. They had only a problem to solve. When the HFY fleet finally reached Earth on the third day, Warlord Cortec expected to see a peaceful, sleeping planet. Instead, he saw a wall of trouble. His sensors were jammed by signals from Stan's houseboat. His communications were scrambled by retired cryptographers using equipment they had built themselves. His ships were being tracked by amateur astronomers. His sensors were being blinded by lasers from a lake house in Michigan. And in front of his fleet, hanging in space, was a swarm of small satellites that no one had told him about. The satellites were not weapons, not really. They were just heavy objects, moving very fast. But heavy objects moving very fast can do terrible things to a warship. Warlord Cortec demanded answers. He sent a message in plain concordance language. Identify yourselves. Which government has built these defenses? The reply came back in a calm, slow human voice. It was an old voice. the voice of a man who had seen too much to be scared anymore. No government, son. Just folks with time on their hands. Warlord Cortex's 3 eyes opened wide. He understood, in that moment, that the reports had been true. He had brought a war fleet to fight an army. But the humans had not sent an army. They had sent their grandparents. And their grandparents were ready. The battle, if it could be called a battle, lasted 9 hours. The Kreshval fleet never fired a single shot. They tried to. They really did. But every time a Kreshval ship locked onto a target, its sensors went dark. Every time a captain gave an order, the radio filled with static. Every time a pilot tried to move, a swarm of small satellites forced the ship to turn away. Warlord Cortex watched his great fleet become helpless. His ships drifted. His weapons were useless. His communications were broken. And through it all, the humans did not attack. They did not kill. They simply made it impossible for the Kreshval to do anything at all. After 9 hours, Warlord Cortex did something no Kreshval warlord had ever done before. He surrendered. He sent the message himself, in clear concordance language. We surrender. Please accept our surrender. Please stop. The reply came from the same calm old voice as before. Well now, that's the smart choice. Lower your shields and open your airlocks. We're sending some folks over to have a chat. The folks who came aboard the Kreshval flagship were not soldiers. They were 6 retired humans. They had flown up in a small private spacecraft. The oldest was 81. The youngest was 67. They carried no weapons. They carried folding chairs, a coffee pot, and a large tray of homemade sandwiches. They walked onto the bridge of the Kreshval flagship, set up their chairs, and poured coffee for everyone. Warlord Cortex did not know what to do. He sat down, because they told him to. He drank the coffee, because they offered it. He ate a sandwich, because he was hungry. Then one of the humans, a small woman with white hair, taught him how to play poker. By the time the Concordance rescue fleet arrived, the Kreshval crew and the retired humans were all sitting together, playing cards and telling stories. Warlord Cortex had won 3 games. He was laughing. He could not remember the last time he had laughed. The Concordance admiral demanded to take over. The humans shrugged and packed up their chairs. They left the flagship without saying much, only waving goodbye to the Kreshval crew. Warlord Cortex watched them leave. He turned to his first officer and spoke quietly. Those were not warriors, he said. Those were grandparents. And we were defeated by grandparents. His first officer nodded slowly. We must never speak of this again. No, the warlord agreed. We must never speak of this again. Back on Earth, the news of the victory spread quickly. There were no parades. There were no medals. The retired humans, who had saved the world, simply went back to their normal lives. Reggie Thornton went back to his tea and his radar. Stan Brennan went back to his houseboat. Eleanor Vance went back to her rockets. Margaret Chen went back to her SETI database. But the galaxy had changed. It did not change back. The Concordance Council called an emergency meeting. Earth's admission ceremony, which had been planned for months, was now the most important event in recent galactic history. Every species wanted to know who this Earth delegation would be, and what they would demand. On the day of the ceremony, the Great Hall of the Concordance was full. Delegates from hundreds of species sat in their assigned seats. Ambassador Vreshtul stood near the front, his 7 limbs folded in the formal position. He had been named Earth's permanent liaison to the Concordance. He looked older now. The last few weeks had aged him. The doors at the back of the hall opened. The Earth delegation walked in. There were 5 of them. They were not in formal robes. They wore soft clothes, cardigans, comfortable shoes. The leader of the delegation was a small woman with kind eyes and white hair. She carried a tin box. It was Doris Mendelson, the retired librarian from Ohio. The humans had voted, and they had chosen her. She had not wanted the job, but she had agreed to do it because, she said, her book club had just finished its reading list, and she had some free time. Doris walked to the front of the hall. She set the tin box on the table in front of the council. She opened the box. It was full of cookies. Warm, fresh cookies. She had baked them that morning. "Hello, everyone," she said in a calm voice. "I brought cookies. Please, help yourself. They have chocolate chips." No one moved. No one knew what to do. Chairman Vasa, the leader of the council, finally stood up. He looked at Doris. He looked at the cookies. He looked at the other 4 humans behind her, who were smiling gently. "Ambassador Mendelssohn," the chairman said, "we must discuss certain matters. Your species has shown unusual abilities. We would like to understand them. We would like to set some rules." "Rules?" Doris said. "What kind of rules?" "Rules about your retired citizens," the chairman said carefully. "They are a great power. The galaxy has never seen such a power before. We feel that some limits would be wise, some treaties, some agreements about what they may and may not do." Doris listened with a patient expression. She had been a librarian for 43 years. She had listened to many worried people in that time. She knew how to listen. When the chairman was finished, she spoke softly. "Sir, I understand your worry, but I must tell you something important. Retirement is not a weapon. It is not an army. It is not a program that my government controls. It is just what people do when they have time. We cannot set rules on it. We would not want to. But they are dangerous," one of the delegates called out. "They are not dangerous," Doris said gently. "They are just bored. And when humans are bored, we find things to do. Some of us grow tomatoes. Some of us build rockets. Some of us learn new languages. Some of us fix broken alien spaceships. We do these things because we enjoy them, not because we want to scare anyone." She paused. She picked up a cookie and took a small bite. "The galaxy has nothing to fear from our retired citizens," she said, "as long as they stay entertained." The hall was silent. Ambassador Vreshtul stepped forward. He had something to say. He had been thinking about it for weeks. "Honored Council," he said, "I must speak. You asked me, 12 years ago, to study the humans. I studied their armies. I studied their governments. I studied their weapons. I made a mistake. I studied the wrong thing." He looked around the room. Humanity's true power is not its soldiers or its warships. Its true power is its 47 million unrestricted killers of boredom. Citizens with infinite time, deep knowledge, and the belief that any problem can be solved with enough coffee and a well-organized workshop. He paused. "We cannot limit them. We cannot control them. We can only hope, as Ambassador Mendelssohn has said, that they stay entertained." The council voted that afternoon. The vote was unanimous. Earth was admitted to the Concordance. No limits were placed on its retired citizens. No treaties were signed. The humans went home. The galaxy adjusted slowly. New species started to appear on Earth, asking for help with strange problems. A Vishani captain came to Wisconsin to visit Harold Kowalski. They played cribbage together. A group of Tillan scientists came to Ohio to study Doris Mendelssohn's tomatoes. A Kreshval warrior came to Frank Delacroix's basement and asked if he could please see the famous pumpkin-throwing machine. Frank said yes. He fired a pumpkin 200 meters across a field. The Kreshval warrior watched it fly. He began to laugh. He laughed until tears came to his 3 eyes. "My people are warriors," he said. "We do not play. We do not have hobbies. Perhaps we should learn." Frank offered him a cup of coffee and a chair. "Well then," Frank said, "pull up a seat. We've got all afternoon." Somewhere in a small Wisconsin town, a 71-year-old retired engineer named Harold Kowalski was teaching his grandson how to fix a broken radio. The boy was 8 years old. He was serious about it. He wanted to learn. "Why is this important, Grandpa?" the boy asked. Harold smiled and handed him a small screwdriver. "Well, son," he said, "you never know when the aliens might need help again. And when they do, somebody has to be ready." The boy nodded. He took the screwdriver and got to work. High above, in the quiet dark of space, the stars kept shining. The galaxy kept turning. And 47 million retired humans kept doing what they had always done. They stayed busy. They stayed curious. They stayed entertained. And the galaxy stayed safe.